The term masochist was a word that never existed in my vocabulary until the year 2022, but I could never understand how such a group existed. It seemed absurd, but I understood that the world is a dark place and has even darker people within it. And I believed I was better than this, better than them. But how naive I was indeed. It took me playing Dark Souls to understand that masochism isn't a problem. It's an art. And like all art forms, there are good ones and utterly trashy ones. Actually, now that I think about it, aren't all forms of masochism just trashy? Nah, I'm just talking nonsense, right? Dark Souls, the golden child of From Software, though not the firstborn, it is certainly the one that stepped out and stood head and shoulders above anything ever made at the time. I remember first playing this at my friend's house back in 2013. Due to my newfound taste for RPGs, I had just finished Oblivion and Skyrim and was itching for more, something unique and different. And he suggested it, and I played it for a solid 3 hours and I hated it. I found it boring and simply slow due to the fact that I didn't know what to do. But that was it. I wanted to be spoon-fed. That was the problem right there. I wanted to be a baby. And then it finally happened. I grew up here. I finally decided to join all the cool kids. I decided to face my fears and finally say that I beat Dark Souls 10 years later. Again, my naivety, it's like this giant ball of fear that just piles out of nowhere. Like, what the fuck was I actually thinking that this game would be easy just because I thought I was a vet? All because what? I platinum Elden Ring? No flex there. While there is no doubt that later series in the Souls franchise surpassed this in difficulty, there is no denying one fact. That this game is fucking hard. Like, the amount of bullshit thrown at you is insane. It's garbage flying at you at godlike speeds. And we need to be extremely honest with ourselves here. The team responsible for designing the bullshit known as Blighttown and Sense Castle deserve the warmest spot in hell. Like, they deserve VIP treatment there. Because I remember switching up the PS. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to go through the castle today, you know, because I was like, you know what, it's finally open, let me go through it, right? And I decided to go through it. I decided to go to these areas. I was happy. Like, you know, I've had bullshit thrown at me before, but like, those areas straight up ruined my afternoon. They left me in a certain, I can't even put it into words. I just reached new heights of irritation, and don't even get me started on the Chaos Witch Isabel. Like, oh my god, man, if I thought that Rykard pissed me off, if I feel sorry for anyone who played Dark Souls freaking 10 years ago, man. I am sorry that you experienced that bullshit. I am sorry. The thing about Dark Souls is that most people say that it doesn't have a proper story, a well-designed, detailed narrative or lore, that it's just a bunch of information thrown out there and that these guys actually have no idea that what they're doing. And as a result, it's like they just made a game that was really hard. They focused on the gameplay elements and just forsake the story narrative of the game, and then decided to just hide those flaws with the quality of the game. And that could be true, but in all fairness, the truth is that that's far from the truth, very far from it. And why do I say this is that, you know, when I first faced the final boss of Dark Souls, Gwyn the Lord of Cinders, he was a joke, an utter joke. I mean, I faced Smorg and Onestein, and these people legit made me have to get good at this game. I mean, every other boss was difficult, but these two legit made me stay up an entire night cussing all types of words that my mother would turn in her grave if she had to hear me right now. This pathetic shell of a man was what I had to deal with after going through so much bullshit in this game. And I thought that these guys just ran out of ideas. That From Software were just they thought this was difficult and they were just doing all this at random. But that wasn't the truth. In fact, that was again far from it. In my second playthrough, I actually paid more attention to it. I focused more in my attempt to try 100% the game, and I discovered that it wasn't some generic story, but rather there was meaning to it all. And if I can point out an example, I'd have to point out an isekai. If you've ever watched isekai, an anime where people are basically as the plot, like anime character, main protagonist gets sent to another world and he has to figure shit out, randomly becomes OP, saves the world. That's basically the plot line. But then is that one thing, like my example if I have to use when it comes to isekai, is ReZero. ReZero follows the protagonist who's again transferred to another world, but then he doesn't know what he's supposed to do. He's just there. He's like, okay, I'm in another world, but then what goes on? He doesn't know what's the world story, the world structure, and he figures it out as he goes along. And even when we finished season 1 of it, we were all asking the question, what's the point? And from a story perspective, it feels like, okay, it was a good anime, but then it was like story-wise, there wasn't anything. They just gave us its and bits, and that's it. They left us. But then when you look into it, that's the truth of isekai. If you have to go to another world, you have to go somewhere to a random place, is that all you get is its and bits of information. There's no pause the menu in your life and then be like, oh, okay, I'm going to go check the quest log or the journal on what the story is. Whenever they give you a quest line, they always write there in detail what the story is. But then that's not how life works, is that they give you bits and bits. You hear what you hear. Someone tells you a half truth, and you try and make sense of it. And that's what happens in Dark Souls, is that you get transferred to another world. The creators of this world have an idea what they're doing. They know what they're doing. And you can go ahead and try and figure, like, is this choice good? Is that choice bad? It's all subjectively up to you based on the information you have with it. I remember when they gave us the prophecy that we have to become Lord of Cinders. This was after they told me to just ring 2 bells. They said ring 2 bells and apparently something good happens. They didn't tell me what happens. I ring 2 bells and a gate opens. I go through the gate, I end up in Ando Lando, and boom, all of a sudden I'm told I have to become Lord. Yeah, that's going to help me. Sure, you have an amazing figure, but that doesn't give me much to go on. And to say that the world doesn't have information is totally unfair and wrong, because there's plenty of it. The world isn't dead, it's actually alive, quite alive. Yeah, the final boss of Dark Souls was a bit underwhelming, because lore-wise, that's who he was. He was a man who was afraid of the dark. He grew up with that trauma of darkness overtaking the world, so he made himself a light bulb, and even that light bulb had to run out, and he knew that we had to be the next big thing. Yeah, I mean, he knew what was going to happen. He was just afraid. He was weak. He was a man who was too old for power. Anyone saying Dark Souls has no lore is just a filthy casual. I'm sorry, I meant lazy casual. And it's okay, you don't have to get the lore. But to say that there isn't one is wrong, subjectively speaking, of course. But that's it. That's the only good thing in terms of lore when it comes to Dark Souls. Because as you know, it's again not about the lore. Even though it's there, it's not about the lore. It's about the foreplay.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I mean, like, when it comes down to it, Dark Souls is a punishing game. It's a very rewarding game, true, when you get to overtake those bosses, those areas, those no health bar bosses. It's incredible when you get to face them and overcome them after dying to them again and again and again. Like, there's no cap when it comes to Dark Souls. Is filthy. It's a game that's disgustingly full of impossible bosses, but amidst that impossibility, there's always a glimmer of hope. Every boss is a learning curve. Some bosses are there to educate you, others are there to stat check you, and finally other bosses are simply downright there to beat you into utter submission. Why is it? Like, what's the point of it, you ask? Like, why at the end of the day, why do we have to suffer? Like the reason for that, why you may ask, is just at the end of the day, it's not to beat the final boss or to get super OP, because the final boss of Dark Souls, Gwyn, isn't the final boss of Dark Souls. The final boss of Dark Souls are these fucking guys, the invaders of Dark Souls. That's the final boss.